Welcome to the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and current events. How do the events in our world today align with the Word of God? What should be the focus of the Apostolic Christian in response? How do we look at worldviews through a biblical lens? Join us for an in-depth discussion, lively conversation, and so much more as we tackle these subjects in depth. Are you ready? Let's begin right now. And now the hosts of the BAC Podcast, Brian Sexton, and pastor of Bible Apostolic Church, Huntington, West Virginia, Pastor Aaron Fairburn.
And welcome to the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and current events. Brian Sexton is always joined by Pastor Aaron Fairburn. Pastor, how are you today?
Man, fantastic. I used to have a friend say if I was any better, I'd be twins.
I always say if I was any better, I'd be taking out shot. So, but I put green on today. I was going to wear a hoodie that my wife got me, and I thought, well, I've got on some green Converse weapons that I bought, and there's a story behind that. But we look Christmassy today. This is not a Christmas edition of the BAC Podcast. This is just us not color coordinating today.
Yeah. Well, I looked to make sure whatever I wore the last two times that I didn't. I said, I got to look there.
The importance of high fashion on the BAC Podcast. No, these tennis shoes I have on, they're green Converse weapons. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a teenager, Converse rolled out the weapon basketball shoe. And I always wanted a pair of them. Magic Johnson wore a pair of them, Larry Bird. Marshall's basketball team at the time was Converse. And so now everybody's Nike. You don't see Converse very. You either see Nike or Adidas or Under Armour.
Yeah.
With the college teams now. And so I saw these on I think on Facebook or something. Converse popped up into my feed. And these weapons popped up into my feed, and I thought, I'd love to have a pair of Converse weapons. And when my new book came out and I started selling a few of these books, I hopped online, and I got these for like $50. And I'm like, well, I can justify getting these, and they're green. They're Marshall green. So, we being in Huntington, they're Marshall green. So I thought, I'll just wear these today. And so that's why the miss on the color coordination. So we've now sufficiently wasted 2 minutes of our audience's time on color coordination. But anyway, it's good to be with you. We're recording this on Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to our wives and those listening. Of course,
that's why I wore red.
Well, yeah,
not really, but we could say that.
Well, and as we record this on a Friday tonight, we have our church's Valentine's banquet, and so yeah, you'll see this on Monday when it releases to YouTube. But by that time, happy belated Valentine's Day. So, it is what it is. But it's interesting. We were talking before we started recording, and I always said this when I did the Roten show and did live radio and things like that. Sometimes the best conversations never make the air.
Yeah.
And so you and I were talking about a number of different things. I want to start here, if we can, and sprinkle some current events in, and then we'll cycle back to another discussion. What was on my mind this morning, you're hearing a lot about things that we've been talking about in the church for years. We've been talking in the news cycle about fraud and waste and things like that. And I've got a story I want to read. This is from Fox News. Expert reveals massive levels of waste DOGE can slash from entitlements and pet projects. And it says a lot of fat. You would think that smart, educated people would know better than not to waste money. And I'll read just a little bit of the story. I want to get your comment on it. As Democrats blast Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, efforts as a constitutional crisis, Fox News Digital spoke to a government spending expert who explained that many departments, including entitlements, are ripe with fat that can and should be cut. And this man named James Agresti, the president of the nonprofit research institute Just Facts, pointed out to $2 billion worth of improper payments in 2022, enough to pay 89,997 retired workers in 2023. So they found these improper payments in Social Security. And what they found that people that are 150 years old are still getting Social Security. And he said this, he said, it's hard to wrap your head around a figure like that. And so that's what got me thinking about, and I want to start here today as we talk about it, stewardship.
Yeah.
As a pastor, how hard is it at times to deliver that kind of message about stewardship? Because some folks will say, well, my finances are my business, Pastor. How dare you talk to me about stewardship? When you find your talk, what are some things that you really want to emphasize around stewardship?
Well, first of all, I kind of have a rule for myself, and that is I don't want to know what anybody pays in tithes or offerings at the church unless there's a specific reason for it. And I've only had that come up one time. And so we have a lady, she's the only person in the church that knows. I do this on purpose. I do this so I can talk about money and nobody feels like I'm singling them out.
Yeah.
And so a stewardship is really important. As a matter of fact, if I believe that, and I believe the scripture backs me on this, if God gives you things and you're wasteful, the Lord's probably not going to continue to give it to you. As a matter of fact, really, we could say there are natural laws. Remember, God wrote those, right? He wrote all those natural laws. And if you don't respect something, you will not keep it. If you do not respect money, you won't have any.
Yeah.
If you view money as an evil, the Bible never says money's an evil. It says that the love of money.
That's right.
Money's just a means for us to get things done. As a matter of fact, just right off starting, just as a basis of understanding with stewardship, we have to understand what money is. And money is a way for me to take my labor to transform that into a good that's able to be traded in the future.
Right.
And so I can take my labor, and money allows us to transform our labor into money that can be used later on any way I want to. So when we do that, we would never think of just wasting our own sweat and blood, you know. And this goes two different ways. Once you have it, people that worked hard for it, if you worked hard for your money, usually you're not so quick to just throw it away. You're actually very discerning. And then secondly, if you haven't worked for it, but you inherited it, or you hear about people winning the lottery and what you don't have any respect for, and you just throw it everywhere.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stay with you because you have no respect for it. And so even in the church, when people are giving, we have a responsibility to be wise with how we spend the money. Now, I'm not saying that there's never a time where we've wasted, but it's never on purpose. You know, every church, I think, has time where you do a project, you realize, oh no, we got ahead of ourselves. You may have to do something over, repaint a wall or whatever. But for the most part, it's our goal. And I think any nonprofit that has transparency. Here at our church, churches are structured differently, but our church, we're structured where the board has absolute oversight over the building and the money, meaning they have to vote on things. I have a certain amount of money that I'm allowed to spend each month, and that basically is just running the church. And I don't have to go to the board just about every little thing, but I have a cap. And I was actually the one that set that cap because I understood. I learned sometimes by observation. I've observed some things in the past and the way different people done it. And so I said, hey, I want to make sure that I can never be accused of anything.
And here's
propriety.
Well, and I mean to jump in here, but here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people understand about church finances is it's not like the federal government where they're going to spend money regardless of what comes in.
That's right.
That, that's why our national debt is $36 trillion.
Yeah.
It's because they're going to spend no matter what. A church doesn't really know what it's going to take in because, you have members that come and members that go. You have folks that will tithe and give offerings faithfully and some not so faithfully. And it's not that you don't love those people and things like that. It's to your point, and I know other pastors that have done this, they are intentional about not knowing who tithes and what they tithe because they've told me, and you and I have talked about this, it can cloud, we're humans. Yeah. It will cloud your judgment. You can say, well, and I'll use this as an example from sales. Okay. And this is where I'm really going to be able to tap into you from you being an entrepreneur and having a ton of experience in sales. People will treat customers differently depending on how much money they spend.
Yeah.
I saw it for years and years and years, not only in the food business, but in other industries that I was in. You treat people, oh, this is a great customer, because they spend all this money. And you don't realize you treat everybody the same and everybody becomes a great customer. And so that's really important. I want to tap into your business acumen for just a second. What principles from your business that you had a successful business for many years, what principles do you take from your entrepreneurship time that you incorporate now as a pastor in kind of overseeing some of these things?
Well, probably more than you realize, because church is similar to a business. The only difference is the product is salvation. We're selling Jesus. And we're really
not little tiny Jesus. It's not like you can, go buy those little Lego figures. Now that might be a good fundraiser.
I don't know about that. Yeah. So, but anyways, so what happens is, even in the running of a church, you have the building, our building, when I took over as pastor, no one's fault. For 20 years, we thought they were coming to buy the building the next year. I mean, for 20 years, it was that way.
And let me put some perspective behind that for those of you that are not aware. Where our church property sits, we were sitting right in the middle of a road expansion project. It was State Route 10 in West Virginia. This road that runs in front of the church actually goes all the way to southern West Virginia, about 75 or 80 miles away. And it was a way to tie the interstate with that part of southern West Virginia for economic development. And this project actually started about 22 or 23 years ago.
Yeah. They've been they've been talking about it for many years before they actually got anything started, but they started buying properties. And because of that, a lot of maintenance got neglected. We just assumed that they were going to buy our church out. So why, the thought was, why put money into something they're getting ready to come buy us out?
100%. Yeah.
Well, what happens after all those years, and they literally, they spent almost as much money to build a wall in front of our church as it would have cost them just to buy the church out. They bought everything on both sides of us, left us. And the reason being is they said we were a landmark. And, I thought, well, that's crazy. We've only been here since about 1974, 75. And, but anyway, so they did it. And so here we're left with this. So we go on now that I'm in pastor, we've spent quite a bit of money just getting things caught back up to date.
And of course, costs, to do something pre-COVID. And I don't want to bring that up, but it feels like, and my wife and I are dealing with a situation with our car. We're waiting now 3 months for a hood for our car. Our car was in a little bit of an accident, and we're waiting 3 months. And pre-COVID, you didn't wait that long. And plus, the cost of building supplies and the cost of materials and things like that have gone up. And you and I have talked about that before privately. That was one of your areas of expertise when you were in business for yourself. your ability to estimate jobs that you are going to do and do it very well, how do you balance the need that you have or the opportunity cost versus the real cost, and knowing when the right time is to do projects to maximize the dollar spent?
Well, that's a juggling act. You can bid a project. Back when I had a construction company, I could bid a project and I could know that for the most part materials were going to be about the same price when I went to do the project.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the same today. We went through so much ups and downs with the cost of material. And so even, applying that to a church, sure, sooner the better, usually. Mm-hmm. There are times where we know things are inflated and they'll come down. Speaking of, don't mean to go back to politics, but just we know that with Donald Trump throwing tariffs around like he is,
right,
which the country's going wild, especially, one side. But really, anybody who really understands what's happening knows that these are just bargaining chips. All this will settle down.
Right.
There's a lot of countries that have a lot of tariffs on us that we're not. He's wanting them to get those tariffs off, and he wants it to be even-handed, and that's a good thing. This will not settle. We will have some high prices real quick till they get things figured out, with steel and some different things, but all this will get settled down. But anyways, in a church.
Well, and let me jump in here again, and I don't mean to keep jumping in. Boy, I love where this conversation's going because there's a lot of layers that we're unpacking here. I believe part of what the president is trying to do is trying to bring more of that production back to the United States.
Absolutely. Yes.
Where we can have, and we're seeing it in our area. We're 30 minutes away where we sit from an $800 million project called Nucor. There's a steel company in Mason County, a neighboring county to us here in Cabell County, mm-hmm. that. And I was by there yesterday. It's incredible.
It's huge.
The Nucor part of it. And then you've got all the rental companies that have equipment and things like that. They're sprouting up all over the place. People are leasing trailers. They're leasing all these things are sprouting.
Land is skyrocketing.
Well, and this is what I told my wife yesterday. I said, whoever has the McDonald's franchise for this area, there's a prime spot for a McDonald's. And 5 years ago, you would have said you're out of your mind if you put a McDonald's there. But now you're going to have they're going to have initially about 400 employees. And there's a guy that had
$100,000 a year.
Yeah, and there was which in West Virginia is an incredible amount of money. But what I'm saying is that there's a guy that's had a convenience store there for several years. Very nice. They sell food, things like that. My wife said, boy, did that guy
just in time.
Projection right.
I don't know if he knew that was coming, but he had remodeled that thing right before they all, But I will say this: we know there's going to be on that move, there's going to be a little city pop up there, a little town's going to pop up around that because it's, But going back to our subject here, some of the other things that I really wanted to point out was this one thing. I've learned more in my mistakes in businesses than I have learned from my successes. And
boy, that's so true. Say that again so that you know.
Over and over and over. I had an entrepreneurial spirit. And so I had started business after I can't tell you. I probably in total had maybe either been partners or had for myself, and that was another thing I learned is not to have a partner. But anyways,
you might consider yourself a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
And the last one I had was the first time I'd had what I would consider any kind of a real success, and then even in that. I've seen my weakness, which helps me today. One of the things I was able to recognize is that I had things that I was very strong at. Because I went to Marshall business, so because I was in business school, I had a little bit of a leg up on a lot of the other contractors around because most of them don't have that type of experience. I also was in the construction field most of my life, one way or another, so I understood that as well. And those two things come together. But then I had to get to the place where I had to manage people. And I found out that I was not a great manager of people because I wanted to be everybody's friend.
Yeah.
And you cannot have a business. It's so different than church.
Yeah.
The motivation for people working is different. I don't have to push people and threaten to fire people in the church because they're doing things out of their heart. Whereas in a business, that's kind of the way it has to be. And I found out, I'm not strong in that. I need help there.
Right.
And recognizing I needed help there, since I've been pastor, I've tried to put those things in place and still working on that, still working on getting all of the administrative structure in place because if you're a pastor and you're watching, you may already know this. I would say if you have any decent sized church at all, you know this. And if you went through a growth period, you probably know this. But if you're a small pastor just beginning, this may be something you've not heard. If you are going to experience real growth, you have to be organized because God will send the people, but you won't keep them.
Yeah.
And organization helps you keep those people. It helps people not to fall through the cracks so often. And so any growing church, actually, we had you had set up a lunch with Keith Waters.
Yep, my cousin, my first cousin. Shout out to my cousin Keith.
Yeah, and Keith Waters, if you don't know, he was the administrator for a church in our area. That
still is. He's administrative pastor for a church called Christ Temple here in Huntington. Some of you watching may know that. Keith has been there. Not to interrupt you. Keith and my family have been there. My family has actually been there since the late 1950s. In some form or fashion, early 1960s. So I had, at one time, probably all of my uncles on the Sexton side went to that church. And, a couple of them moved away to Parkersburg and things like that, which is about 2 hours away. But there's always been, in fact, my oldest uncle, Virgil Sexton, this was, I can't remember if my dad had already passed or not. Don't get old. It's not for the feeble-hearted. But they honored him because he had been a deacon in that church like 50, 60 years.
Yeah. And
so they honored my other uncle Barney for the same thing. They were honoring them because of their service to the church. And Keith's mom was my dad's oldest sister. So she was the second one of the 12 Sexton kids. So Keith's been there. He's probably gone to church there 45 or 50 years himself, maybe longer.
Well, he was responsible for really helping that church to go through its growth spurt.
Yeah.
So Brother Sexton here had set up a meeting with Keith Waters, who I think a lot of. He's a good man, godly man, and his heart is for church growth. But anyways, we were talking about church growth, and he looked at me and he said, Pastor, he said, I'm going to tell you this. It's your job to get vision and communicate the vision. And until you get somebody like me, and he wasn't being braggadocious in any way. He was saying until God sent me a called administrator, somebody who was called for the job, he said, there's only so much you can do. And it really had an impact on me. And the thing of it is I've heard that now over and over and over. And not just from him, just different people. I keep hearing that. And so, but I understood that because I had a business, and I understood, okay, that was something that was holding me back. I needed good management. And just because you have somebody that's great at the job doesn't mean they're good at managing people. You got to have great managers, and you got to be, in a business, you got to be willing to pay the money for them. Well, in a church, a lot of times, especially a small church growing, the Lord's got to send you those people because, number one, they got to feel called to the thing. Yeah. You could just put anybody in. Everybody, listen. There was a quote, a brother that I used to know. He's passed away now. His name is Brother James Rowe. Brother James Rowe had a saying. He said, the issue is never the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is always control. And so a lot of people want to be an administrator in the church, but it's because of their need for control. But there are some people that are called to it. They're going to be good at it. They're going to be people persons. When somebody comes up and tells me, I've had this happen so many times you won't believe it. Well, you're the pastor. You need to tell them how it is. And I just laugh. Because I realize, hey, if God ever made you a pastor with that attitude, you ain't keeping anybody.
Well, it is. It's amazing in our society, Pastor, that everybody wants an authoritative figure or an authoritarian figure until they actually have an authoritarian.
They want you to be an authoritative figure to everybody else. They don't mean them.
Well, and that's, again, let's talk about what we started this conversation with. If you look at it, Donald Trump is the definition of an authoritative figure.
Yeah.
He has a strong command of the room. He has a strong knowledge base. But here's the difference. Donald Trump can make everybody in the room feel like he's talking exactly to them.
Absolutely.
And his people skills are off the chart. He wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
But again, it's growth. It is. And again, people don't start out being good stewards of money, of resources. Exactly.
Most people, my grandpa.
Go ahead with that. Yeah.
My grandpa was taught by his parents. Okay. And I remember my great grandmother and grandfather, they really were savers. My mother-in-law was a saver. Man, you wouldn't believe how many little cans of pennies and nickels, and she just saved change all the time, just small amounts of money, but it adds up. That's how she was. And
my wife's grandparents did that for my son Bryce. They would put money in a little piggy bank, and at Christmas time, they would do that for the great grandkids. They started with him because he was the oldest.
Yeah.
And there'd be $200 or $300, $400 just in that piggy bank. Just $1 here, $1. If you saved $1 a day, in a year's time, you have $365.
Yeah.
$2 is $720. You think $2 is nothing? I paid $2 for this bottle of Coke Zero I'm drinking, and we don't think anything about it, but it starts to add up little by little.
Yeah.
And that's the thing in the church is a lot of times people say, well, I can't afford to give. And I had a boss one time that said this about people in the restaurant business. He said they're tripping over dollars to get to nickels.
Yeah.
And we've had that mentality in the church of, oh, I can't afford to give.
Yeah.
And it may be that God's to say, hey, I know you've got $5 in your pocket and you don't get paid till Wednesday. Why don't you give that and prove me?
Sometimes that is, I will say with our church, our people, what I found is they're incredibly generous. We have a little bit of a different mindset. I think I'm not alone, or other pastors do as well, but not all pastors. And I never talk about tithes and offerings without also talk about personal charity.
Do you know? And this is just forgive me. I'm interrupting here, and I don't mean to interrupt. It just you're pinging a lot of these thoughts in my mind. 2 years ago, when we came back, we saw a need in our sanctuary to do some remodeling. We had pews that were starting to fall apart. They were over 40 years old.
Yeah.
There was carpet that was that age, and we saw a need to do chairs and carpet and things like that. And it was miraculous. I'm still overwhelmed at what God did.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible. God just supplied the need. We found chairs that we thought were this color. Turned out they were different color, and it was just exactly what we were looking for. Yeah. They were easy to get here. Then we went to the carpet, and we agreed on that. We found it, and the Lord supplied the funds that we needed for the carpet. We redid our altar. We redid our sanctuary right now is beautiful. It is beautiful. We've still got some things we want to do, but God showed us that He will supply those needs that we have. And
100%.
I'm still amazed that at what God did, because it's like, Lord, we did this. But Pastor, I'm amazed how economically we did it and how beautiful it turned out.
Yeah, and it wasn't. The truth is it wasn't that we didn't plan that far in advance. It was like we said, "Hey, this is a need," and all of a sudden, all the pieces just went boop, fell in our lap, and the money was there. It was just incredible. We were able to get the chairs. We were able to get the carpet. We redone the platform a little bit, actually gained 100 square feet on the platform without taking any space away from the, I know that sounds crazy. It was just the way it was designed. When we squared it off, it was space that really wasn't taken away from anywhere else. And so it turned out really good, really well. And everybody come together. We had several brothers in the church that really, come and help make it happen. We had funders and we had workers, and it was wonderful. But that keeping up a building is so important. Churches so often can let things go too long. They would never think about keeping their living room furniture and their carpet in their living room that long, but they'll do that with the house of God. I think the house of God needs to,
And I'll say this. It's amazing to me that it's amazing just how, like you said, everything came together, and it was just like we walked in here and the carpet was done, and we were like, wow, what a transformation. And these chairs that we're sitting in, these are nice chairs. These are great chairs. I never dreamed how great these chairs would be to do a podcast, because, and we've gotten, and thank you for those that have commented. We've had folks that commented about the backdrop, how nice it looks. These chairs were given to us.
Yeah.
My goodness. And I mean, it's like
a bunch of them, actually.
The Lord just continues to supply. But you know what, Pastor? I want to take you there for a minute.
Hey, I want to just
go ahead.
Just quickly.
Please, go ahead.
The Lord supply. Art, this is one thing that we have done as a church. We have, in the middle of all of that, there was a lot of money that went into our sanctuary and the downstairs floors that we were doing. In the middle of all that, we were consistent as a church to give to charity. We wasn't just taking money for us and we were consistently taking up money for charity. I'm a big believer in it. I believe in our personal lives that we need to be involved in charity. And what I mean by that is worthy charity. When you see you got a neighbor that's struggling, that needs food, you got somebody that's got doctor bills that and you can help. I think that when there's a true need, that we reach out, and that the people I love to help the most. I love to help anybody in need, but I'm saying it's very good to help people outside the church. But the church the Bible over and over and over talks about how we are helping one another. And so most of our charity is focused on other brothers and sisters that are in need, even outside of our church. I remember one of the first acts of charity we done is took up $1,000 for someone that goes to a neighboring church. I don't even know if, I'm not saying they didn't, but I'm not sure how much but we were willing to give to that. We wanted to make that something that happened. It was
well, I had a teammate on my team at work that just lost his home to a fire on Sunday. And I talked to him a couple of days ago, and he was overwhelmed by what people had given into him and his family. And I said, but you and I have talked about the times that you've given to folks and things like that. And that's what we're saying is the Lord returns. You don't give that. The Bible says, give and it shall be given to you, good measure, pressed down. And we mentioned that on the last podcast. And I don't know why we're continuing to talk about that. It's just a theme of our heart.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see now that things are coming to light with how our government spends money and things like that. And it's like, wait a minute. We've got folks in North Carolina that are still without homes. We got folks in California that are without homes. And here we are sending billions of dollars overseas for stupid stuff. Really? Stupid stuff.
Let me say this. I don't
Charity begins at home. Right?
Yeah, it really does. And two things on that. Number one, the politics side of it. I wanted to say this. All that money that we were sending out had agendas to it. They were sending money. If everybody noticed, when Joe Biden got in, there was this explosion all over the world of transgender, transgender push and an alternate lifestyle that was being pushed and thrown in people's faces, and we were like, "What in the world is happening? How the whole world?" Well, come to find out, our government had a piggy bank of $40 billion, and we're giving money out so that they would, giving money out. I think it was Brazil or somewhere down South America, $70,000 for some type of a trans play or something like that, or maybe that was in Europe, and then also $2 million in another country for reassignment surgeries, and they were giving businesses in other countries and people money, but also a lot of that money they were given had a way of directly flowing back into politicians' pockets. And that's why, and so we got to be, the church can never let that be said about us. We cannot enrich ourselves. We have to have full transparency, which if they had full transparency there would have never happened. Now, and back to the church, we have to absolutely be good stewards with the people's money.
100%.
Because I know they're giving it to God, but they're giving it. And in their minds, they want to see good things happen. When people see things happening with their money, they get on board and they're willing to do more. And like I say, I know somebody's out there arguing, well, that's God's. It is, but people gave it, and whether it's right or wrong, they can't help but still having a certain attachment to what happens to that money.
Right.
If they think it's being spent wrong, well, they're going to be upset about it.
Well, the church, and we talked about this a little bit the last podcast, so let's go here for a second and build off that conversation. The church has had a stigma, so to speak, because of what some bad actors did with money. So people would be convinced, urged, propelled into giving into these ministries, and the pastor was living in $1 million home.
Yeah.
Or the pastor was driving, these people were, regular church folks were given money, and the pastor had a lavish lifestyle, or the televangelist had a lavish lifestyle. I'm all for and I would say this if you weren't sitting here next to me, I'm all for the man of God having a nice home, having a nice car. I don't believe for a second that I'm driving a nice car and the man of God's having to go take his car to get it fixed every week. I don't believe that. But I also don't believe that if I'm out here busting my hump, so to speak, and traveling and doing this, all the stuff that I'm sacrificing to give to the work of God, and then the pastor just bought a $200,000 Bentley.
Yeah. Pastor shouldn't be the highest paid guy in the church.
Well, that, you know what? That is a great point, because I don't mind the pastor being the highest paid guy in the church, because again, and I'm on the leadership team here at our church and the ministry staff. They're not calling me at 2:00 in the morning when their baby ends up going to the hospital.
Listen, I'm pastor and I am full time. I'm certainly not against. I mean, the Bible is very direct about it, that, not to muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth.
No, but a laborer is worthier of his hire.
That's right. And if he does a good job, double honor, and that where it says double honor, it's talking about double pay. However, there does come, and we all know it. None of us think poorly about a pastor that's paid well. What we think poorly about is when a pastor is paid and so well that they live lavish lifestyles that are worldly,
Yeah.
They're sensual. And listen, it's okay to have some nice clothes. We get this thing mixed up in America today, in the West, and really the whole world. Clothes are cheap. In Jesus's day, the clothes were very expensive. Most people only had one or two outfits. So the Bible talks about basically expensive clothing. Well, you rarely find that today.
Well, it's because in America we've got a lot of discount stores.
Yeah,
we've got in our area we've got Ross's, we've got TJ Maxx, we've got Marshalls, we've got Target. You can get Walmart. I've bought nice things to wear at Walmart. Yeah, Walmart. You can go get you a nice pair of jeans at Walmart. And, you don't have to spend top dollar because we're so consumer driven as a country that a lot of these companies will overproduce goods that end up to these secondary.
And they're cheap clothes. On to my point, they're cheap clothes. That's what I'm getting at. We don't
wear
one outfit for 20 years.
We've become a disposable society.
Yeah. And so, my point is not that the preacher shouldn't have a nice suit, not that the preacher shouldn't have nice
100%.
clothes, not that the preacher can't have a nice house, should have, I believe, when it's appropriate. But there comes a point where we all know it's gone above and beyond. And that is, like I said, when the pastor lives above everybody else, I think we have to reevaluate. I understand there's some pastors that pastor 2,000-3,000 people and probably their workload. I know we have a local church, and I know they have an independent agency come in, evaluate their whole staff and how much everybody should get paid, and that's what they go by. And I think that's a great way to do it. So because it keeps the people that actually are getting paid out of that process, so they're not deciding their own paycheck. But things have gone up so much today. And so it's going to be very difficult for a while. For a lot of pastors are going to be struggling even more because as fast as inflation is happening, until wages hit, we had the first time Donald Trump was in, we had a huge lift in wages, and I'm expecting that probably to happen a second time. But every time it does, it's not very long until eggs follow and everything else follows, and so that ends up hurting us even more. But
we have to have. With a lift in wages, we have to understand the value of making sure that the greatest way that you can build wealth is to grow your income and reduce your expenses.
Yeah.
And so, but here's the problem that we have in our society is that everybody feels like we have to have more this, more that. I can remember.
People don't even save anymore.
Well, and I'll share this with you. I've talked about this. I remember 3 or 4 years ago seeing a pair of Cole Haan shoes, and I would see certain people in my industry wear them. Oh man, I'd like to have a pair of Cole Haans. And I finally found a pair for $45, free shipping. Okay, I bought that first pair. There are so many ways to get brand name. And this is not a course on how to wear brand names frugally. It is, I'm not willing, there's a certain threshold I'm not willing to cross to have that particular item. And now I've probably got 5 pairs of Cole Haans because I've sourced them in a way, I've sourced new shoes in a very affordable way, and I don't buy them unless I've got a little bit of extra money to do it. That's just my mindset. I like, in my closet, I've got more shoes than my wife does, believe it or not. But I don't overspend on those things just because I've learned that, okay, well, I don't want to put myself in a deficit situation. And that's what we've done as a society is we have borrowed on depreciating assets instead of saying, okay, I'm going to invest in something that goes up instead of investing in things that go down. That is not good finance. And we're not trying to tell you, certainly Pastor and I are not trying to tell you how to spend your money. We're not trying to do that. But when we talk about waste and we talk about things and we see that in our news cycle, it makes you stop and think to yourself, okay, do I have some areas of wasteful spending in my own household that I could cut back on and be more efficient myself? And that's what DOGE is. It's the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah.
It's our hard-earned dollars that we're sending to Washington, D.C. every week or every month or however it goes that our government is wasting when we're struggling at times to go, man, I'd really like to go to eat at a nice restaurant today, but I don't have the extra money. And these folks are just going, whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's areas of opportunity for us as Christians to look at our own. Jesus tells us, consider why are you looking at the mote or the small speck in your brother's eye, and here's a beam in your own eye?
Actually, I'm just going to make a strange point here. First of all, I don't believe, I would not call myself frugal. I think I'm a fairly decent steward with my money. I wasn't always, but I try to be a fairly good student with my own personal money. But I'll say this, I'm not saying you have to be frugal for sure. I'm not frugal, I like I said, but I try to be thoughtful in not getting myself in bad situations, and we can do that easy. But the other thing is, a lot of people that are free spenders, the one good thing about it, the only good thing about that, because they usually get themselves in trouble, and I think we've all been there in youth, is that they don't have what we would call the love of money, and that's a good thing, but they also don't have an appreciation for it either. Yeah. But like I said, youth tends to do that. But our society, I will defend people in this one way. Our society has trained you up, all of us, to be consumers. Yeah. Because that's what our economy runs on. It needs you to buy a new blender. This is why that in products, they design products to fail after so many years. It's designed in the product. This is why things don't last anymore, because they need you to buy a new hot water tank every 5 or 7 years. They need you to buy. These companies figured, okay, we got to keep them coming back. And so they will figure, how long does this have to last for us to convince them to still buy it, but yet can go bad so they can come back again and we can get another customer.
Or they'll withhold certain enhancements. They'll add a feature like, oh, this blender you bought, now it has this feature.
Yeah, they're always trying to, but usually you don't find this quality that lasts for, you don't find it in clothing anymore. You don't find it in shoes anymore. Listen, to get a pair of shoes at the same quality that you would have found it just commonly in 1900, for what, everybody was buying, today, you're going to pay upwards of $400 for that same quality in shoes, because they glue them now. They don't stitch them. When you get Goodyear welting on your shoes, that's when they actually sew the sole and everything together. When you're paying top dollar, and those are just the quality that everything used to be. So, I guess making that point. And kind of we're getting a little bit off getting on finances now, which is a thing that I love to talk about, really, but I probably don't have time to move on to a new subject. So
well, and here's the thing that I'll say, you're exactly right, is back in 1900, back in the 20s, back in the 30s, let's just say 100 years ago, 1925, when you bought a pair of shoes, a man to have those shoes had to save. Yeah. To buy those shoes. Absolutely. And they wore those shoes for 10, 15 years.
They got the soles, they re-sewed on. They got new soles.
They re-sewed, yeah.
Same pair of shoes.
Yeah. And
hand them down to his children.
Yeah. And there are, and it's a dying industry.
Levi jeans.
Yes.
When they first come out, they were made out of hemp. hemp is known to be so much stronger than cotton. Okay. And so I'm not going to go into the history of all that, how things happen, but there was a big push to get rid of hemp and to promote nylon is really what that was about. However, because hemp had nothing to do with marijuana, it was an industrial crop. But when Levi's jeans were made out of hemp, they lasted so long that often a father would pass them down to his son, and the son would pass them down to his son. They would span 3 generations. That doesn't happen anymore because everything's so cheap.
Well, it's the introduction of polyester into garments that cheapen them and things like that. And, you talk about shoes. There used to be shoe cobblers in every town.
Yep.
Now you have to look around and find, if you have a nice pair of Allen Edmonds or Florsheim's or the high-end shoe brands, and you want to get them resold because you like the shoes, you really have to go and source a place.
You're sending them
off. Exactly. And so, but again, it's about being a good steward and just saying to yourself, okay, what makes more economic sense? Do I spend $50 or $100 getting these shoes resold and getting 4 or 5 more years wear out of them? Or do I just dispose of them, make them a disposable product again, and just, I'm looking at a jacket I've got over there. I've had that jacket probably 13 or 14 years. It's a Nike jacket, and it just, I'm amazed at the quality of it. It just continues to last.
It's systemic. I know that word is.
There you go.
It's systemic in our mentality today.
Yeah.
Let me show you how that goes into the church. People now look for the instant experience.
Oh, yeah.
Let me tell you something that it eats me up. Sometimes I love the altar. I love the experience of it. I love it when people come to the altar. But I have watched over my life, so many people will hear the word of God, they'll feel conviction, they'll come to the altar and they'll cry it out and get up and not make any change because they already felt a resolution in themselves because they went and cried about it. And sometimes I may take criticism for this. I really don't care. But sometimes I'll tell people, I'm not going to let you come to the altar and get it out. I want you to make a change. I don't want you to come to the altar and cry it out and then it's over with. Right. I want you to go home and I want you to stay awake at night thinking about this and try and realizing you need to make a change. And that's so important. Like I said, everything's quick, microwave, throwaway, disposable, and it gets all in it's just in every aspect of our lives, that consumerism, that mentality, it's in everything. Got to have things right now. How many people, I'm going to say I'm guilty of this right now. I'm guilty of this. We buy big packs of Solo cups, and we buy paper plates and disposable silverware because we can be so busy at times that it's so much simpler for us to do that. However, my parents would have absolutely just croaked before they ever spent money on that kind of stuff.
Mine too.
But, today we see time that we've been taught in our society, and it's true that calculating, it's the economics of things. Okay, I've got so much time. How much time can I save doing this? Is this much money spent on this worth the time? Sometimes it actually is. If you've ever had, a lot of you've taken economics. When you take economics, you start realizing the value of time and the cost of even owning things. Economics was an eye-opening course for me.
Yes.
Helped me not just in my business, it helped me in every aspect of my life when I realized that there was a cost to even owning things. They call it cost and ownership. You own a car, it costs you to keep it up or it'll break down. You own a house, it costs you to keep that house in good order so that it's still valuable. It will depreciate and deteriorate really quickly if you don't take care of it. If you got clothes and you don't take care of them, if you buy a suit jacket,
yep,
or a suit, and you take that suit just just kind of lazily, get it dirty and you take it to the cleaners all the time, the suit's not going to last you. They're not designed to go to the cleaners. A suit is designed to be brushed out and only taken to the cleaners once or twice a year because it's so hard on the fabrics, But we don't even think about that because everything's so throwaway now.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think I don't know if I got a suit that's that expensive worth that, but I think just pretty much everybody, because it's the way our society's going, it's consumerism. If we all decided we're not going to do that, no more participate, if we all decided, no, from now on I'm buying quality and I'm keeping the rest of my life, our entire economy would collapse because it's based on us continuing to spend. I actually made that argument in one of my business classes one time, and I can remember the professor said, "That's interesting. Anybody got a good point?" We ended up having a little debate in the class over that very thing because I said, "Look, they need us to. They want us to. They don't want us to save. If we save, then the whole thing falls to pieces." And but anyways, I just wanted to make that point about how it has got in our minds, and it's actually consumerism it's a very carnal mentality, but it's pervasive in our culture, and most people are have that mentality, not even meaning to.
Yeah, no, and I love that what you talked about the last few minutes. With that, we'll make that the last word of this podcast, because again, I can't add to that. That was really, really good. Man, it's been good again to be with you today, and next episode, we'll get into other things. If you have a topic that you'd like us to address, please put that in the comments. Like and share these videos. Subscribe to the BAC Podcast. We're going to do a lot more of these for Pastor Aaron Fairburn. I'm Brian Sexton. We'll see you next time on the BAC Podcast. God bless.
Thank you for joining us today on the BAC Podcast, the Bible, Apostolics, and Current Event. Bible Apostolic Church is located at 3521 16th Street Road, Huntington, West Virginia. Service times are Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for Sunday school, 11 a.m. for evangelistic service, and Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. for Bible study. For more information on Bible Apostolic Church, please go to the Bible Apostolic Church Facebook page. God bless you, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the BAC Podcast.